world was young, the mountains green, no stain yet on the moon was seen.
Then with a crash came a great ringing shout. Ra, boom, ra.
3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie.
He's talking about Tolkien. I don't know if it's, do you do season 2 for The Hobbit or for The Fellowship? Whatever we're talking about. I don't know what we're talking about.
Talking about Tolkien, Fellowship of the Ring.
This is the prologue that I didn't read, and feels good. Feels good.
Yeah, I thought we'd start off with some where are they now type stuff, and of course the prologue, which I told you did not have to read, so I assume you never will.
I heard Bomber's like super fat though. Is that in this prologue? Because that's mean.
No, that's
Okay.
not in the prologue.
All right.
That's in the appendix of Return of the King.
Oh, good. I'm glad we got that in there.
So yeah, the first thing for everybody who's fresh off the Hobbit series, let's talk about where are they now? What happened to everybody from last time? Now, of course, we know Bilbo went back to his hobbit hole. Gandalf returned to his mysterious wanderings.
His Hobbit mansion, and he's got a boatload of gold with him. Yeah.
He's got a boatload of
And
gold,
silver.
though not so much as he is rumored to have. But a little lesser known is what happens to the dwarves, because at the end of The Hobbit, we just get a scene with Gandalf and Balin.
I know what happens to Balin, as well as Feely, Killy, and Thorin. They all end up in the same place, Ben.
And the halls of their ancestors, waiting for the world to be remade. Yeah, so of course, Thorin Oakenshield died at the Battle of Five Armies. Feely died at the Battle of Five Armies. Killy died at the Battle
Why
of
does it
Five
hurt
Armies.
so much, Ben?
Why does it hurt so much?
Because it was real. Then, of course, I think the next most important to talk about is probably Balin, who is, I think, the dwarf besides Thorin with probably the most dialogue.
Yes, I would agree.
I think
he
Balin
seemed to be the most important one after Thorin.
Yeah, and if you watched the movies, this probably does not come through at all. But Thorin was actually the oldest of the dwarves.
Oh, wow. No, I thought it was Balin, because he looks like he's so much older.
Balin, I believe, is mentioned as having gray hair. Thorin has not yet gone gray. But Balin, I think, is the second oldest. Thorin is the oldest. Balin decides, after they get the Lonely Mountain back and Dain is king under the mountain, that he's not done trying to reclaim homelands.
Yeah.
There's another homeland that is unclaimed.
And we'll get to visit it on this adventure.
Gandalf, we could pass through the mines of Moria. My cousin Balin would give us a royal welcome.
Yes, Balin decides he is going to try to reclaim the mines of Moria. And why not? Most of the orcs are probably dead after the Battle of the Five Armies.
You don't have a hobbit to do all the heavy lifting for you this time. That's what he really needed to win this one.
And Durin's Bane is probably just a myth. So, and who even knows what it was?
And plus we beat a dragon. Us. We did. All of us dwarves, we single-handedly beat that dragon is how we're going to tell it to our children. So
I'm sure someone will show up and shoot whatever Durin's Bane might be. We talked about Durin's Bane and the history of Moria a little bit in the Hobbit episodes, if you want to check them out.
You know what they awoke in the darkness of Khazad-dûm.
We'll probably talk about it again when it becomes relevant. But he took Ori with him as a scribe.
Okay. So I know what happens to Ori.
Ori is the one who writes that book. And he also took Oin with him. And what happens is there's some ugliness in the mines, as you may have heard. And Oin actually tries to find a way out of the mines. They send him ahead to scout to see if they
And
can
he
get
was
out.
never heard from again?
Well, yes, but so what happens here is they take the mines from the east gate, which is on the Lonely Mountain side of
Wait,
Moria.
are you telling me Moria and the Lonely Mountain are linked?
No, I'm telling you,
Okay.
they left the Lonely Mountain, headed
Head west?
yes, and then they start taking it back a little bit at a time, and they try to they they try to sort of take and hold some stuff. There is a lake of particular importance. We'll mention that when we get to it in the Lord of the Rings, but it's a particular religious significance to the dwarves. And Balin is out admiring this lake one day, and he gets shot unceremoniously by an orc. He's
Wow.
dead, and that's
Wow.
the start of the orcs' pushback. They start trying to retake. They actually take the eastern gate, and so the dwarves are trapped. So they're looking for the
Wow.
other way out.
It didn't sound like a good plan to wall yourself inside. Is this pond, this dwarven pond, does it have some sort of underwater eldritch horror in it? Okay.
No, because that's the exit.
Okay.
They're looking for a way out, and they send Oin to scout, and he finds it. He finds that door, the elven door, Belloc, who and opens, speak friend and enter. He also finds a tentacle monster,
Okay.
and he is promptly killed. Most of the people who were with him are killed, but a few of them make it back to say, "We're well and truly screwed."
A shadow moves in the dark. You cannot get out. They are coming.
They all die, including Oin. So
Okay, so you're going to have to remind me when we get to that chapter to tell me what the fuck that tentacle monster even was, because now that I think about it, I don't think it's ever explained.
Yeah, we'll talk about it then. But there's no for sure answer, but there's a couple of guesses we can make.
Did anyone ever clean that up after Sauron's downfall?
Yes, I do think there is a final taking of Moria. The dwarves do
Okay.
finally take it back.
After someone does all the heavy lifting for them.
Yeah, after Frodo comes in and takes care of that. So now we have Thorin, Fili, Kili, Balin, Oin, and Ori. So 6 of the 13 are dead. And that brings us to the ones...
Bomber wishes he was dead with how fat he apparently becomes. He's got congestive heart failure. It's pretty bad.
Okay, so basically everybody else remains in Erebor. They
Yeah.
hang out and just enjoy their wealth.
You fucking got all the money in the world and reclaimed your kingdom. Why were you like, you know what? I need a second kingdom.
So Bomber enjoys his wealth a little more than most. He actually eats himself into like my 600-pound life territory.
He hires a bunch of lesser dwarves to carry him.
It is said that he grew so fat that he could no longer move himself from his couch to his chair at table, and it took 6 young dwarves to lift him. And I think that's kind of portrayed as like Bomber living his best life instead of like crippling obesity. I don't know. Tolkien hated Bomber. I don't know why. But then we have the others, Dory and Nori, and Beefer and Boffer. They chill. There's not much of a note to be said about them. They were definitely alive during the War of the Ring and probably fought on the Dale front, which is not super mentioned in the books. Yeah, they did pretty well. We also have, of course, How could you forget Dwalin?
Yeah, of course. I remember him. He was like Balin,
Dwalin,
but not as cool.
yeah, Dwalin is one of the tougher dwarves and the longest lived. He lives 91 years after Sauron is defeated.
Nice.
He buries them all. He's the oldest one.
Nice.
There's one more dwarf I failed to mention. Do you know which one?
Nori? Did you mentioned Dory? Beaver?
I mentioned Beaver.
Let's see.
Arguably the most
Gloin?
important dwarf of all. Gloin.
Yeah.
Do you know what Gloin is famous for?
He faded into the background and just let everyone else do the work, and no one mentioned him hardly ever.
He especially let someone do most of the work. Can you think of anyone who it might be?
Was it Oin, his brother or whatever?
It was his son, Gimli.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Good for him. Building a child, or however dwarves do it.
They do it in the usual way. There's just not a lot of dwarf women. We've actually talked about this.
And I don't believe you.
There's about a third of the population of dwarves is female. And of those who are women, some don't even bother to get married because dwarves have a tendency to become obsessed with their projects because they were created by a guy who loves creating and they're kind of clockwork things, and dwarves reproduce very, very slowly. And most of them aren't even interested in it. So that's where they wound up. Now let's talk about specifically my version of Fellowship of the Ring. It begins with a foreword where Tolkien explains, among other things, how as much as he loves that you all love this book, please stop pirating it.
No deal.
Because the American publication of Lord of the Rings has a storied history. Some publishing companies just decided, hey, this popular British book, we're just going to print that and sell it without permission.
Sounds like copyright infringement.
It was obvious copyright infringement. It was just very difficult to like physically stop, especially when word was traveling at the speed of mail. So there's a ton of bootleg paperback Lord of the Rings. So Tolkien would like to address his American readers, who he's super grateful for. But by the way, buy this book and only this book. Ballantine Books, Lord of the Rings. That's the one you want to buy, guys. He's like, I did write this primarily for the enjoyment of the reader, but daddy need money. So
wait, can we just start printing Lord of the Rings books? That we just do that? Start up a printing press.
No, I think so. I don't know if our listeners know this, but almost every dislike or negative comment I get about Words About Books is somebody disappointed that this is not an audiobook, an unauthorized reading of whatever we're covering.
They're really upset that it was just two guys talking about the book. They're the victim. They came here to steal a book, and instead they had to listen to us.
You can go on any platform and find dozens, hundreds, thousands perhaps of people, AI voices, what have you, reading books. So
yeah, grocery prices are high, but like Audible's pretty cheap.
YouTube's cheaper, my friend. And nobody cares.
Yeah.
Certainly not YouTube. So
Wow.
the part I said that you didn't have to read, because we'll talk about it.
I won't.
Is the prologue concerning hobbits. This covers... Oh, okay. You're leaning all the way back.
All right, let's do this. Nice and comfy.
Tolkien is somewhat famous for doing 3-page descriptions of a tree. And there's actually one interesting anecdote in The Inklings by Humphrey Carpenter, where Tolkien used to hang out with C.S. Lewis and his brother Warnie Lewis and a couple other guys.
What's his last name? Warney?
His first name is Warney.
Wow.
It's a nickname.
Wonder why that never caught on.
I forget what for.
Warner. Warren.
I don't care. The Lewises are... Maybe one day we'll talk about C.S. Lewis in a special episode of talking about Tolkien, because I have a lot of thoughts. But
we can talk about him in a bonus episode. There you go. There's the idea.
There's the idea. Yeah,
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
He used to go on... One of the things these guys like to do is they would like to go on long walks through the English countryside back before...
Holding hands and...
Perhaps. It's... Now, when I say long walks, I'm talking like a month.
What?
Where they literally walk across the island.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Like, this is back in the day where things are kind of connected by rail, but there's no... There's roads, but there's not like major highways and stuff. So you could still just walk from like town to town,
So, like,
stop at an inn when you're ready, and just keep going.
So, like, did they not work for a living? Like, what?
They're all
what is
professors.
This? Man, it's bullshit.
Yeah, they're all Oxford professors. They get they get months off at a time. So they love to do that. And one time they took Tolkien with them, and they hated it because apparently Tolkien wanted to stop at every tree and animal and insect and like analyze it and classify it and figure out like, oh,
No.
how long has this been here? And
I'm going to keep walking. You can meet me at the inn, or you could stay out as late as you want. Don't get stabbed. Okay, later.
We have their letters where they complain about each other, and it's kind of hilarious. I hope something like that. Like, I don't know if our digital communications will survive like that. I kind of wonder if like...
Well, let's go get some paper now. Let's start drafting letters to each other.
Well, I was going to say, like, what if our Slack just becomes public? Like, what if someday people are really interested in the words about books,
Isn't
guys?
it slowly deleting itself? Like, it doesn't
They say
store
that.
everything.
They say that, but I have this weird feeling that if I paid them, all of a sudden all of it would be there.
You're probably right.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't trust tech companies.
So there you go. When we pass away, someone gives Slack like $20, and
Someone gives Slack $20.
it's all there.
I'll get you the words about book Slack. You can see. It's okay. We'll be dead. You can't do anything. You can't do anything with that information. So, because Tolkien's famous for going into crazy amounts of detail in his writing, in his walking, in probably his lectures, this prologue is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18 pages.
Sounds like too much.
About the history, lore, government. There is a one-page treatise on pipeweed. And
Perfect. There's a government for the hobbits. I figured it was just like, we're libertarians. We're out here in our hobbit holes trading birds and shells and nuts and shit.
So first, let's go back to... We got a little bit of this in The Hobbit. What is a hobbit? They're obviously related to humans. Tolkien says that in this intro. They are men, capital M, for the purposes of the story. Their fate is the fate of men.
But they can resist the ring, Ben.
Well, they often live to be 100.
It's all those mansions and wealth. Turns out that the key to living to 100 is just have a lot of money.
They're not all wealthy. He talks about this. Though many of them own homes.
That sounds like wealth to me.
That does sound like wealth to me.
That sounds like a wealth a lot of people in our generation are never going to experience.
They're shorter than dwarves, and they're not nearly as well built. Dwarves are pretty muscular. A dwarf may come up to your belly button, but he can also like rip your kneecaps off. So,
but
hobbits
he can't fight a dragon. So checkmate.
We didn't need to. We showed up and it ran away.
That is an accurate depiction of what happened. Yes.
Unless you count the movie, in which case we dumped gold on him, significantly increasing his strength before sending him to Lake Town to murder the women and children.
We choose to not remember it like that, you know?
There's a quote I put into one of the episodes last season of Peter Jackson, and this was him talking about Lord of the Rings, where he said,
with our script writing, as every draft that we wrote, it became closer and closer to what was in the book.
and I just like in my head, I'm just The Hobbit is just flashing like Vietnam.
Why does it hurt so much?
Like, what were you thinking? Did you learn nothing? But yeah, so the Hobbits are short.
What was that interview for? Was that for The Hobbit?
No, that was for Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay.
When he said that.
Yeah, that was
And then-
before Peter Jackson, I don't know, had his stroke or was replaced by aliens.
He sold out his art, his country, and his craft to make The Hobbit. And I will not change my mind on that. As many people keep telling me he's not that bad, I hate him. So, hobbits do not study magic. They do not do any great works.
Hold on. Don't study magic. So you can learn magic?
We're going to have a magic conversation at some point. We've talked about it a little in the Hobbit episodes. Magic in general is not something that's like super accessible to men, but there are some men described as having performed magic. For example, like the Witch King is described as having been a powerful sorcerer prior to becoming the Witch King.
And he was probably pissed off that God didn't let him have magic, but he let all the elves have magic.
It's tough to say. It's tough to say exactly what he means by magic, whether what the people are doing is...
Gandalf had a gun.
Gandalf had a grenade.
I want a gun.
It's tough to tell if they're actually doing magic or if they're doing something that appears to the ignorant as magic. And even Tolkien himself is kind of wishy-washy on this when specifically asked about it. He'll say things like, with Aragorn's healing abilities, maybe it was magic.
His what?
Like, Aragorn is a pretty good healer. He's a pretty good doctor. He knows a lot about herbs. He's pretty good at treating wounds.
I do not remember him using magic, though. I remember him using King's Foil on Frodo.
This is kind of the thing, is the line often blurs between craft and magic. In Tolkien, you don't often see a lot of just straight up like fireballs or flashy like calling down lightning or any of the things like we traditionally associate with D&D magic. It's often a little bit more subtle, but he does use the word spells. People are using enchanted weapons and armor. So it's tough to say. But he specifically makes a point in this chapter of saying hobbits do not study magic.
Yeah, because they just sit around all day in their fucking holes enjoying the high life.
So the reason he mentions it is because hobbits, he still maintains that they may live to this modern day, but you'll never see one because they've become so good at not being seen if they do not wish to be seen. This is just a skill. This is not magic. No one knows why you're laughing. They don't know what I cut.
Yep. Leave the laughter in, though. I want them they can just imagine.
So the hobbits, the separation of hobbits from men happened long, long ago. And the only people who even have records of that time are the elves. And Tolkien tells us, kind of funnily, the elves tend to write about elves.
Wow.
They took absolutely no notice of the hobbits.
Wow.
So we have no record of their separation from other humans. I guess
most people didn't really notice the hobbits, though, right? Because even Sauron is confused as to where the Shire is.
Yeah, they don't really pay a lot of attention to the hobbits. but a few do. So the hobbits, let's see here. The hobbits do keep records themselves, but their records only began after they settled the Shire. There was a period of time that Tolkien calls their wandering days. The earliest tales seem to glimpse a time when they dwelt in the upper valleys of Anduin, between the eaves of Greenwood the Great, which would become Mirkwood, and the Misty Mountains. Why they later undertook the hard and perilous crossing of the mountains of Eriador is no longer certain. Their own accounts speak of the multiplying of men in the land and a shadow that fell on the forest. So maybe they decided to peace out because Sauron was in there. Maybe they decided to peace out because humans were crowding them. Hard to say. But
Probably
Tolkien, perhaps Tolkien foresaw D&D and the need for sub-races to sort of spice things up. So hobbits are divided into three somewhat different, and this is his word, breeds.
Okay.
Harfoots, Stewers, and Fallowhides.
Got it. Hill, mountain, forest.
The Harfoots were browner of skin, smaller, shorter, and they were beardless and bootless. Hobbits have hairy, tough feet.
Okay. All right.
So they went without shoes.
Is there a type of hobbit that does wear shoes?
Yes.
Oh my god. What fucking weirdos.
The Stewers were broader, heavier in build. Their hands and feet were larger. They preferred flatlands and riversides. The Harfoots, by the way, preferred highlands and hillsides.
Okay, so hill hobbits, plains hobbits. We either got mountain or forest hobbits.
The Fallowhides were fairer of skin and also of hair, and they were taller and slimmer than others. They were lovers of trees and of woodlands.
Forest hobbits, there you go.
The Harfoots had much to do with dwarves. They were the most inclined to settle in one place, and longest preserved their ancestral habit of living in tunnels and holes.
So Bilbo and Frodo and them are Harfoots.
Well, there's a great coming together, so it's a little mixed up. The Stewers lingered long on the banks of the great river Anduin and were less shy of men. So the Harfoots hang out with dwarves, the Stewers hang out with men.
And the forest ones hang out with elves.
Absolutely. The Fallowhides, the least numerous, were a northerly branch. They were more friendly with elves than the other hobbits were, and had more skill in language and song than in handicrafts. They were the theater kids.
Ooh. So they're like the worst ones. No wonder they were the least numerous. They didn't have any important skills, and they all died out. Except for subscribing to our patron. Thank you, Jamie. My favorite theater kid.
We do put him through it. I don't think about him when he's listening to these episodes, but I support what you do. Just not if you did it in high school, I guess.
There you go.
I support adult theater people. I do not support theater children. So the hobbits, they start to settle down. They start to build some settlements. In these early days, the hobbits learned their letters and began to write after the manner of the Dunedain, who had in their turn long before learned the art from the elves. Do you know who the Dunedain are? Is that the deep lore?
Are these the... No, I'm thinking of Numenor.
No, you're kind of on the right track. You're kind of on the right track.
The Dunedain, the descendants of them that lived, and they're
the Rangers. Men. They're the Rangers. Okay. They're the ones.
Yeah, I thought Aragorn was one of them. Yeah.
So in those days, they also forgot whatever languages they had used before and pretty much adopted the common speech, which is called Westron. Stop calling it common, Nate.
I'm gonna call it common because that's what it is in D&D. Maybe you should have allowed Westron into the D&D books. Can they use Westron in D&D books?
Probably not. They can't use Hobbit.
Yeah,
They probably can't
I
use
didn't think
Westron.
so.
No.
When is Hobbit in the public domain?
We'll live to see it. Ideally.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it's
Do you
not too
think
much
that
longer.
D&D will change Halfling to Hobbit?
I think they should, because halfling is a disparaging term. So, you may remember in The Hobbit, there was a little bit of a controversy when Bilbo said they don't even know about the king in these parts. To which many nerds wrote to Tolkien and asked, "What king?" Well, he thought long and way too hard about that.
By the way, January 1st, 2044. Anyway, yes,
Yeah.
tell me about what king?
About this time, legend among the hobbits first becomes history with a reckoning of years. For it was in the 1601st year of the Third Age that the Fallowhide brothers, Marcho and Blanco, they are apparently...
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding you. So Tolkien actually said he was a big fan of Spanish once.
Yeah.
He really likes the way it sounds,
Yeah.
and it sounds really weird.
Yeah, it sounds weird when you put it next to all this other stuff. Yeah.
It sounds really weird next to Old Norse.
It sounds like that sounds like a Frank Herbert thing.
Marcho and Blanco
mixing up shit, and you're not really thinking about how it goes together. Yeah, that doesn't sound great.
Okay, so they were in Bree. Bree is a very old settlement, by the way. It used to
cheese.
It used to be bigger, but Marcho and Blanco, they set out from Bree. They ask for permission from the High King at Fornost, who is a human king, and Fornost is a human country. As the records of Gondor relate, this High King was Argaleb II, the 20th of the Northern Line, which came to an end with Arvedui 300 years later. He made up a whole, because you guys asked him this question, he made up a whole 3,000 year history of the king that Bilbo passingly referred to in one line of The Hobbit.
Well,
and
good.
They set out
you to throw lore out there.
They set out and they got a piece of land from the king, and all they had to give the king in return was that they should keep the Great Bridge in repair and take care of all other bridges and roads. They should also aid the king's messengers and acknowledge his lordship. So that's probably not that bad. I don't see anything about taxes here, so
we should talk about taxes. How do we what are the grocery bills like in the Shire?
What was Aragorn's tax policy?
What were Aragorn's policies as king? What was his taxation policy?
Yeah.
Well, there was a king. They were in name his subjects. They were ruled by their own chieftains and meddled not at all with events in the world outside. To the last battle at Fornost with the Witch Lord of Angmar.
Oh my god, I know that guy.
It said here that the hobbits sent some bowmen to the aid of the king. Or so they maintained. No tales of men record them sending anyone to help.
Wow.
He wrote that. Tolkien wrote that. The hobbits say they helped. No one else remembers them being there. But they were very small. So the Witch King conquers the Northern Kingdom, and then the hobbits just kind of creep back in when everyone's gone, and they choose their own leaders, and they're doing pretty good until the Dark Plague and the disastrous long winter and famine that followed it. The plague is something that comes up again and again in like the deep history of Middle Earth. It doesn't matter a ton in Lord of the Rings, but if you really care about like,
And I do.
why people are where they are and all that stuff, the plague is important. The hobbits have never been warlike, though they did fight once in.
They swear. They swear they did, guys.
No, this one they did. This one they definitely did. It was the Battle of the Greenfields, in which Bandobras took
Fucking
routed an invasion of orcs.
I don't believe that. Except, I guess the Tooks were like larger. They were almost small by human standards.
Yes, the Tooks tend to be larger. So a lot of the hobbits live in holes in the ground, but in the Shire days, and I hesitate to even tell you this,
Uh-oh.
only the richest
Oh, God. God damn it.
and the absolute poorest of hobbits still lived in holes in the ground, while the richest lived in mansion-like holes. The poorest lived in more traditional holes in the ground.
Wow. I didn't realize there was such poverty in the Shire. Seemed like such an idyllic place, but I guess you just had to ignore the poor people in order for that to be the case.
Most hobbits, as the hobbits started to multiply and take over more stuff, they built houses in the traditional sense. They probably learned it from the humans and the dwarves.
And then they built a bus, and they put all the poor people on the bus and sent it to Gondor because, in their words, Gondor has more resources to take care of poor people. And they're owning the lib.
It doesn't mention owning the libs, but speaking of the libs, concerning pipeweed.
Perfect.
There is another thing about the hobbits of old that must be mentioned, an astonishing habit. They imbibed or inhaled through pipes of clay or wood the smoke of the burning leaves of an herb, which they called pipeweed or leaf, a variety probably of nicotiana. So the authority on pipeweed, and where we have most of our information on pipeweed, comes from Meriadoc Brandybuck, the Merry of the Lord of the Rings. After he got back from his adventure, he decided to sit down. He wrote a lot of books, actually. This is kind of unfair to him, but probably the only book that any hobbit cared about.
He is the annoying Tolkien in this universe. He and his friends are going on a cross-country trip, and he's like, wonder where pipeweed comes from, and he just won't shut up about the pipeweed. He just keeps stopping to look at everything and describe everything.
Mary gives me, like, I know it's nicotine. I know it's not marijuana, as disappointing as that is, but, like, the way they talk about it, like, Mary's a pothead. They do write a lot of books. Okay, all the people involved in the story write books. All the hobbits write books.
Boromir doesn't, and that's why he's my favorite.
Boromir doesn't write a book. That is true. But Faramir does. He writes a book about Boromir called My Father's Son.
God damn it.
No, I'm making that up.
I know.
If you've ever purchased marijuana,
the devil's lettuce,
you will know that it often has interesting names. Like I don't know, Mind Trash or Blueberry Kush, or like, it's always like really weird names, and you're like, wow, I had to get a medical card to buy this medicine, and we're not even really trying anymore, are we, guys? So Mary is going to tell us a little bit about concerning pipeweed, and I'm making this as long. I'm cutting so much out. I just want you to know that.
You better not, Ben. I'm listening to this, so our listeners have to listen to this.
In his book, The Herb Lore of the Shire.
Lore. Fucking Mary.
He says, this is the one art that we can certainly claim to be our own invention. When hobbits first began to smoke is not known. All the legends and family histories take it for granted. For ages, folk in the Shire smoked various herbs, some fouler, some sweeter. But all accounts agree that Tobold Hornblower of Longbottom in the South Farthing first grew the true pipeweed.
That is a lot of words you just threw at me that I think is a person's name and where he comes from, but I can't even begin to. What the fuck? And he and Blanco are in the same universe.
In his gardens, in the days of Isengrim II, about the year
Isengrim.
1070 of Shire reckoning, the best homegrown still comes from that district.
Okay, so he made up a 3,000 year lore to explain the king. What's his reasoning for making up all this lore about pipeweed?
He liked to smoke.
Okay.
The best homegrown still comes from that district, especially the varieties now known as Longbottom Leaf, Old Toby, and Southern Star. How old Toby came by the plant is not recorded, for to his dying day he would not tell.
What? What?
Okay, so...
Got a lot of questions, but he's not answering the ones I want to know.
Okay, so all the same, observations that I've made on my own many journeys south have convinced me that the weed itself is not native to our part of the world, but came northward from the lower Anduin, whither it was, I suspect, originally brought oversea by the men of Westerness. It grows abundantly in Gondor and is richer and larger than in the north, where it is never found wild and flourishes only in warm, sheltered places like Longbottom. The men of Gondor call it sweet gallinus, and esteem it only for the fragrance of its flowers, the fools. From that land it must have been carried up the Greenway during the long centuries between the coming of Elendil and our own days, but even the Dunedain of Gondor will allow us this credit. Hobbits first put it into pipes. Not even the wizards first thought of that before we did. One wizard that I knew took up the art long ago and became as skillful in it as all other things he put his mind to.
You're welcome, Gandalf. You may have come here to save the world, but we saved you.
So then we talk about the quarters of the Shire, the farthings, north, south, east, and west, blah, 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 blah.
Very important, I'm sure.
The only real official in the Shire these days is the mayor of Mickle Delving. And the mayor of Mickle Delving is basically the mayor of the Shire. He's elected...
What's his tax policy like?
How did he handle the orc problem? Did he campaign on a policy of genocide?
Yeah. What's his tax... I'll tell you what his tax policy is like. He's elected every 7 years at the Free Fair on the White Downs. And that's at midsummer. As mayor, his only
7-year
duty...
term? What a fucking tyrant.
A 7-year term. Now let's talk about his duties and powers. His only duty is to preside at banquets given on Shire holidays, which occur at frequent intervals. So it's a busy job.
Too much power. Too much power for one man.
It's a lot of power concentrated in one man. He gets to appoint the postmaster.
Oh my
and
god.
And the first sheriff.
Oh my god. An abuse of power. He gets to appoint everyone that he wants to offices of power.
Yep. By no means were all hobbits lettered, but those who were wrote constantly. The sheriffs, spelled sheriffs, was the name the hobbits gave to their police, or the nearest equivalent. They had, of course, no uniforms, only a feather in their caps, and they were in practice rather haywards than policemen. Often they were concerned more with the strains of beasts than of people.
Yeah, it's a big mistake. You need to have a uniform to feel like a big man.
That's true. There is also a point in here where they say hobbits never kill for sport. They never hunt for sport. And I distinctly remember Bilbo beaming many things with rocks.
Yeah.
And so
maybe he ate those things later. So
or
he's a weirdo.
Yeah, I was going to say, hear me out. Here's another theory. Bilbo is strange among hobbits, right? He goes on adventures. He comes back. He goes away for a year, doesn't tell anybody he's leaving, comes back with chests full of gold, and starts hanging out with wizards and homeless dwarves. I think Bilbo's a psychopath.
Well,
I
yeah,
think
he was born rich.
Bilbo's in the Gondorian mob.
Yeah, he was born rich. So have we elected Bilbo for mayor for life? Do they have term limits?
They do not. They do not have term limits.
Okay,
actually.
so vote for Bilbo, or he's going to send the sheriff and I guess the postmaster after you. He'll kick your ass, and then if you try and write letters to your friends, he won't deliver them.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I can control your communication.
You know who does get elected? Samwise Gamgee.
Oh.
We get a recounting of how Bilbo found the ring. It's also mentioned, which is interesting because I heard from somebody that they newer editions have taken out the explanation at the beginning of The Hobbit that Bilbo lied, and that's why it's different. But he talks about that a lot in this.
Nice.
He mentions it again that Bilbo lied and Gandalf grilled him for the truth.
Wow. What an untrustworthy dick. Am I right?
Then there's 3 pages on the Shire record-keeping practices and
Perfect.
how the Red Book of Westmarch is distributed. So the Red Book of Westmarch is the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. That's the book that Bilbo and Frodo write. It's copied several times. Some of the people who are copying it are only interested in certain parts of it, and so there are copies that are different than other copies. There's also a couple of copies that are made from Bilbo's original manuscript. So, like, if you happen to read a version of The Hobbit where Gollum gives Bilbo the ring, then you got one of those earlier copies. But there are other copies in which the truth was told to Frodo and he amended it. And so if you read a version of The Hobbit based on one of those copies, then Bilbo was not given the ring and he took it.
Okay.
He knew you would
so
be
you
worried
fucked
about
up,
that.
is what you're saying. You fucked up, and you're blaming it on poor Bilbo.
Yeah, and it talks about how Merry and Pippin, they became the heads of their families, and after Aragorn becomes king, sort of unites the peoples in
Just
Middle Earth.
spoiling everything here.
The last book is called Return of the King. And
yeah, that doesn't mean he wins. He returns and he dies immediately.
I'm kind of assuming people know the story. We're going to go through it, but like, I'm also going to tell you this. Lord of the Rings is so dense.
Every frame.
It may help you enjoy it more if you know what's going to happen. I think that makes it easier to pay attention to what's going on in the page. Because I know the first time I read this, I'm going to date myself here. The movies were not out.
Oh my god. I think actually I also read it before the movies.
Yeah, so I had not seen the movies. And if you're reading this to find out what happens, you do get sick of hearing about those trees.
Ben, here's a confession. I never actually finished Return of the King. I stopped right before the Sharky in the Shire stuff.
If you finished Fellowship of the Ring, this isn't like a great endorsement for the rest of this podcast, but like if you finished this book, you could finish the other 2. That's nuts. This is the problem right here. Subsequent readings of Lord of the Rings have been much more enjoyable because, like, I know what happens. I am not reading to find out what happened to the character. I am interested in the history of that tree. I am interested in Mary's long speech about pipeweed. That's what I'm here for. But I had a feeling that if I made you read this prologue, you would be annoying about it.
I feel like it would be my duty to be annoying about it.
Yeah. So where I was going was after Aragorn becomes king and after he sort of unites the peoples of Middle Earth and other people now know who the halflings and the hobbits are, and that the important role they played and everything. They're interested in the world, and they do have a little bit more interaction with the outside world. And they establish a library that has books about things other than Hobbit family genealogies, so we can all fight about who gets the spoons in the end. And Merry and Pippin are like big sponsors of that, and they stock it with books about all the interesting stuff that happened everywhere else. Like maybe they even have books about like the gods in the West, or the hobbits don't care. The hobbits that can read primarily check out concerning pipeweed or the herb lore of the Shire. They primarily check that out just over and over again. They're really still only interested in the pipeweed, the food, and the booze.
And their mansions. Their fucking giant mansions.
Those that have them, yes. Which are few.
That doesn't make it better, actually.
I mean, Bilbo let his gardener live there.
That's weird.
I mean, he let him live in like a house down the road.
Yeah, there you go.
That he
where he
also
belongs. You know, you don't have the help live with you. You know, you gotta put them in their own little tiny house on your property. It's kind of like home ownership, except you still own the home. They don't.
He gave it to him. Well, he gave it to Frodo. And then Frodo gave it to him when Frodo went to heaven.
When Frodo went to heaven?
Look, he's upper middle class, okay?
No, he's not.
He's not a billionaire. I've maintained this. Bilbo is a millionaire. He's not a billionaire.
So he's middle upper class, is what you're telling me.
You have talked to me many times about you owning investment properties, and if you ever do, I'm going to oh my god, my phone thinks I'm talking to it. It said, I don't know what my phone heard, but it said, "You bet friends have each other's backs."
There you
and
go. There you go. It's trying to tell you that you need to have my back.
I can't think of a worse endorsement for AI than having it listen to this podcast and thinking from our banter that friends have each other's backs. No, what I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by this dumbass AI is if you ever have an investment property, I am going to send this to your tenants.
So, but I mean, you could be one of those tenants, Ben. I'm just throwing that out there. I'll give you a solid deal. It'll be great.
If I do your gardening, I can live there.
There you go.
That's actually not a bad deal, dude. A 4-bedroom house in my home. I just gotta grow Nate's tomatoes. Yeah, that's the prologue. You're basically caught up. It talks about the history of the hobbits, where they come from. It gives more details about which hobbits are descended into which families, and I don't really care about the genealogies too much. It is interesting, but again, the hobbits don't do a lot. It talks about pipeweed, which is funny. It talks about how the Shire is governed, if you're really interested in that. And then it talks about the record keeping and how all of this happened. Now that, when I was a kid, I'll admit I could not have cared less about that fourth part, especially as an adult who got into the Norse myth and sagas. It is hilarious how Tolkien has constructed a plausible way that these things were like passed down, and how there are multiple copies and the ambiguities it introduces. And he also talks a lot about how like you can tell certain things because certain words are borrowed from certain cultures. That is all like very real.
Okay,
philology.
but what does he have to say about Blanco?
That he got permission from the king.
Did Blanco come from the Iberian Peninsula of this world, or
with his friend who is not named Poncho, but I forget what it was.
It is something similar to that, though. I feel like, right?
It could not have been Blanco and Poncho. It was Marcho.
Marcho.
I think it's Marcho. I think he wants me to pronounce every letter. There's a lot of instructions on how to pronounce Elvish names and Dwarvish names. Not a lot on hobbits. So this could be Marco, or it could be Marcho. Marcho and Blanco. It's weird how you see like names in RPG video games of like Morgoth and Aragorn and Legolas. You never see Marcho and Blanco.
Yeah, I wonder why that is.
So that's my if you listen to this and you play World of Warcraft, roll a gnome named Marcho.
And then have your friend be Blanco and see who gets it. Or if you're still playing the Lord of the Rings online game, I think that's still a thing.
God, maybe you can meet him.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some time portal instance where you can find Marcho and Blanco. Maybe you could visit the grave of all the people Balin got killed. Like, it's not like they even needed it. As I said, dwarves reproduce very slowly.
We needed another kingdom. Okay.
And they keep starting wars. So, like, the loss of every dwarf has to be, like, massive to their military power.
There's a reason that the men are the dominant species for the Fourth Age.
Yeah.
I assume the dwarves getting their ass constantly kicked is part of that.
Yeah. It was never going to be the dwarves. They're too into their projects. They come out like once every 50 years with a shiny rock, and they're like, whoa, what the hell is this like cell phone stuff?
Yeah, while you were busy building your stupid projects, we were busy building much cooler projects.
Like a podcast.
Yeah, like a podcast. Do you have a podcast? No. You don't.
You don't. They don't
Idiots.
have podcasts. That's it. That's the prologue. That's
all right.
That's what I didn't make you read. Now you do have to read the next chapter, which is a long expected party. It's a party chapter. How boring could it be?
Probably very.
I actually like it quite a bit. It's a good chapter.
I cannot wait for the Black Riders to show up and start ruining people's time. That's what I'm looking forward to. Oh, god damn it. I was thinking about like, there's actually some decent stuff, but then there's a big chunk of this book at the very beginning that is cut out of the movie for pacing purposes. God damn it.
Oh yeah. The whole
I think it's
the
like
thing
3 or 4 chapters, isn't it?
The thing you're going to notice as we go through these books is how different they actually are from the movies. There's a lot of things you have probably forgotten are only in the movie. Like, the one thing that's like a current through the movie where they're setting up like Aragorn's character arc where he's...
Oh, I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, none of that. He's just like...
pretty sure that doesn't happen at all.
Before the book started, he has decided he's going to be the king.
Yeah.
He's not...
Why wouldn't you? Monarchy is awesome.
Well, he decided it mainly because Elrond is like... I mean, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. This is stuff to look forward to.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is
but
a
Elrond's
huge
not
chunk
a dick
of this
to him.
book. No. Why would he be? That's all that's left of his brother. It makes very little sense.
Yeah, but we don't think
even
about
the whole
that
thing.
in the movie.
Even the whole thing where Elrond is like, I was there the day the courage of the race of men failed, and it's like, Elrond, what? First off, you didn't go with him to destroy it.
Yeah, that's not how that happened.
You told him you probably should destroy it, and he's like, nah, I'm gonna keep it. And like, what were you gonna do? Start a fight?
Yeah, in the movie, it really is like, you said to destroy it, and he was like, no, I'm a greedy asshole. It's like, well, Elrond, you also, like, do a golem, charge him, bite his finger off, and jump in the lava with the ring, problem solved.
But like, the interesting thing with that whole exchange is Elrond seems to be implying there in the movie, which
That he knows.
well, this is a nitpick, but like it kind of ruins the very idea of the Fellowship. But like or Elrond seems to be implying there that he could have taken the ring and thrown it in the fire.
Yeah, he could have just pushed a seal door into the crack of doom.
He's like, I was there the day the race of men failed, as if the elves would have done any better. As if the elves did not work with Sauron his damn self to create rings of power in the first place. Like,
well, the thing about having the longest memory in the room is you can remember things however you want, and everyone just has to believe you. Yeah. The rings of power were forged by Sauron himself. No elf involvement there, and you stupid men, you fell victim to his rings, while our rings are awesome and spectacular.
well, he's literally wearing a ring that was created by an elf without Sauron.
Yeah.
But like that's the thing that like that's a fundamental flaw. I can only imagine Christopher Tolkien sitting there being as anal as he is about this, and Elrond saying, I was there the day the courage of men failed, or whatever he says. He must have like almost had an aneurysm, because Elrond is literally implying, he's like, I could have destroyed the ring. And it's like, well, motherfucker, you take it. You're better than Frodo. You're 7,000 years old at this point.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, like, when did Christopher Tolkien die? He died in 2020.
He saw these movies and he gave them a scathing review.
Damn,
He
son.
He hated them. Absolutely.
He lived to be 95.
Yeah.
And he managed to avoid COVID at the last minute.
It's that blood of Numenor, man.
Yeah, blood of All right. Next time, we'll
talking about Tolkien.
Start this gravy train.
The road goes ever on and on, down from the door which began. Now far ahead the road is gone, and I must follow it, if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet. And whither then, I cannot say.